So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good any time of the day or night, wherever you are, peace and blessings. And thank you for joining me again today. So, today I'm going to depart a little bit from the American Nightmare, the history of Jim Crow, because I saw this video and I said, this is just craziness. Anyway, I decided to put it on. I am leaving comments, interjecting in the video to give my take at specific points in the video. So I'm going to go ahead and play it. You, of course, can draw whatever conclusions or however you feel about the video. That's fine. We don't all have to feel the same. And I will see you on the other side. Okay. See y'all soon.
Thank you very much, and thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out here this afternoon. Uh, the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security and I just met with this first flight of South African refugees.
Okay, so this video has just started, and I've already seen some things that are just so disingenuous. It's just ridiculous. So here this gentleman is. I can't even remember his name. It's on the video if you want to know. Um, and he's talking about these quote unquote South African, as they say, Afrikaner, but it's African. They just don't want to be called Africans, um, being refugees. All right, so I'm going to read this definition here of what a refugee is. According, it says a refugee, a person who has been forced to leave their country to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster. Now, as far as we know, there is no war going on in South Africa. Okay. And when they say persecution, it's hostility and ill treatment, especially because of ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or political beliefs. This is the definition that I got. This is from Oxford Dictionary. Okay, so are they being persecuted? Are people being hostile toward them, and are they're being ill treated because of their ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or political beliefs? Well, it depends on what you view as persecution. Now, if you're talking about receiving treatment that you have given to other people in the past for years, the Dutch came to South Africa, took over, took the land from the South Africans. It's calling it their land now, which is so typical of those people. And so there's been some pushback. Now, in this whole thing that they're talking about, people are being killed. Trump's talking about being killed. According to a report in CNN, only one person has been killed. One. All right. And then it says war, a state of armed conflict between different nations or different groups within a nation. No armed conflict. Okay. These people are not, I repeat, are not refugees.
To arrive in our country uh, pursuant to the President's executive order about certain egregious actions in South Africa. The President made it clear that Afrikaners in South Africa who were the victims of unjust racial discrimination.
Victims of unjust racial discrimination. Why does that sound familiar? I wonder where they got that from.
Would be welcome to come to the United States, and he's now delivering on that promise. The Deputy Secretary and I just spoke to some of the folks who arrived on this flight, and they tell quite harrowing stories of the violence that they faced in South Africa that was not redressed by the authorities, by the unjust application of the law.
You see, these are the things that confuse me. Now, he said unjust application of the law. He must not be talking to all Americans. Yeah, because there was a whole lot of unjust application of the law in these United States of America towards specific people. So for him to make that statement as if the United States has always been just in their application of the law is so hypocritical. Hypocrites. That's what you are. Hypocrites.
The United States, as we were proud to say, stands for equal justice under law and the fair and impartial application of the law.
Okay, I'm confused because this man just said that the United States stands for, and I quote, equal justice under the law and the fair and uh, the impartial application of the law. When did the United States start standing for that? Did I miss something?
And again, this is a group that has not experienced that and has, to the contrary, experienced violence and really fear for their lives in South Africa. They were really subject to very serious, egregious, and targeted threats. And
You know, it's really, really strange that all of this mistreatment, all of this persecution of these people took place and nobody caught it. Nobody has a video. Nobody has any audio recordings. Nobody went to the police and filed a report. Nobody said to the news, please come help us. Yeah, where are the receipts?
we wish them well in their journey of the United States. We underscored for them that the American people are a welcoming and generous people, and we underscored the importance of assimilation into the United States, which is one of the very important factors that we look to in refugee admissions. And through this resettlement program for these folks who were vetted in South Africa.
Okay, so in this video, I had to put my eye crutches on, because I'm reading some smaller print. But here's what I want to talk about before I say something else. The Oxford Dictionary, here it is. Okay. And I've looked up the word wish. And it says, feel or express a strong desire or hope for something that cannot and probably will not happen. Just wanted to throw that in there. Okay, and so the secretary said, we wish them well in their journey in the United States because the American people are generous and welcoming people. And that must have been a trait in America that developed over time, like centuries. Because when my ancestors arrived on the slave ships, it was a different welcoming party. Yeah. And I guess that they didn't feel the need to wish that we had a good journey in America because they knew that wasn't going to happen. Assimilation was an important thing because they had the same skin color as the welcoming party for my ancestors, so they were going to fit in just fine. Uh, but the problem is when they open their mouth because they're from South Africa, which means that they're going to have a African dialect, an accent. So the minute they open up their mouths, people are going to question because they're going to be different. But then again, they had the whole apartheid thing going on in South Africa. So, they're probably going to go ahead and mesh with the people who look like them and not have a really hard time assimilating into this country.
And we're sending a clear message that the United States really rejects the egregious persecution of people on the basis of race in South Africa, and we welcome these people to the United States and to a new future. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And then you said the United States is sending a clear message that the United States really rejects egregious persecution of people on the basis of race. What? When, when did you all start to really reject? When was that? Yeah, I must have been asleep. Maybe I was out of the country. That's what it was. Because we're still waiting for that day to come for people not to persecute us based on our race. Or maybe they're just two different Americas. Or maybe there's no explanation.
Good afternoon. I'm Deputy Secretary Troy Edgar. First of all, I just want to thank President Trump, Secretary Noem, for the opportunity to come down here and welcome these folks from South Africa. I'm very grateful for Deputy Secretary Landau. We do a lot of work together to try to further the objectives of the president, and this has been a very important day. It was great to greet these folks that came in, to hear their stories, to hear what they've been through. This is a real situation. These people have went through a lot of stuff, and we're just grateful to have them in the U.S. As many of us know, the United States has a long history of bringing people over.
This man said that the United States has a long history of bringing people over. Now, if I recall correctly, uh, the first group of slaves were brought to the United States in 1619 and arrived in Jamestown, Virginia. Yeah. Now, in on January 1st, 1808, there was a law that was passed that prohibited the transport or import of slaves into the United States of America. Of course, that was almost 200 years after slavery had begun. And then it was 1865 when uh, slavery was abolished, December 1st, I believe, 1865. Slavery was abolished. So we're talking about 60 years after uh, the importation of slavery was outlawed. So, in those 60 years, what did they do for slaves? They bred them. That's what they did, you know. But he's right. The United States has a long history of bringing people over.
Wife was an Iranian, came over during the regime change in the 70s, and she's now here, speaks 5 languages, a school teacher. We think the American dream is possible for these South Africans. We're super excited for them, and Deputy Secretary and myself have given these people our personal information and said anything we could do to help them be successful. We just want to wish them the best. We thank you guys for coming down here and celebrating this with us. Thank you.
Okay, and so there's the second act, the other gentleman that came up, the backup singer, and he started talking about, his wife who was Iranian. Is she not still Iranian? But anyway, she was Iranian, came over here in the 1970s, is a school teacher and speaks 5 languages. Thank you for that information. Appreciate you. But what does that have to do with what we're talking about? The South African quote unquote refugees. Oh, and yes, you said that the American dream, that's what you want for the South Africans. So, I mean, just for my information, just so I can keep it straight, can you go over the American dream for me again? Because, America forced African descendants to help them achieve and realize their American dream. And while we did that, our dream was put on deferment, you know. So, when you're on deferment for so long, you kind of forget, in a sense, why you're there. Like, we were waiting on a dream, but we forgot. But we still remember the nightmares.
A couple questions first, Breitbart.
Hi, thank you for your time. What are some examples of racial discrimination or attacks that initially caught the eye of the Trump administration, and is there a pathway to American citizenship for these refugees?
Sure. Well, thank you for that question. I think if you look at the executive order that the president issued back on February 7th of this year, it talks about the terrible expropriation act that was enacted last year in South Africa that allows for the expropriation without compensation of farmland. A fair number of these refugees were farmers who farmed this particular land for generations and now face the threat not only of expropriation but also of direct violence. We had a chance to speak to them about many of these folks have experience with threatening invasions of their homes, their farms, and a real lack of interest or success of the government in doing anything about this situation, as well, obviously, as several very vociferous South African politicians repeating things like kill the Boer, kill the Afrikaner, and these people have been living under a shadow of violence and terror for some time now. Thank you.
So there were some reporters, and one reporter asked the question, what are some examples of racial discrimination or attacks that initially caught the eye of the Trump administration? And so let's talk about direct violence because, the secretary said that there was direct violence. He said that there was direct violence of threatening invasions of homes and farms. And he said there was the direct violence of very vociferous South African politicians repeating things like kill the Boers, kill the Afrikaners. And then there was the direct threat of living under a shadow of violence and terror for some time now. How long was that? And when did that start? But the one that I really, 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 really like was the lack of interest or success of government in doing anything about the situation. Now, I don't know, that kind of reminds me of how the Supreme Court in the United States of America during Jim Crow kind of turned a blind eye to all of the persecution of African descendants and others, Hispanics, Asians, and even people of the same color who didn't agree with them. A lot of persecution going on that the Supreme Court turned a blind eye to. But I like that because they said that that was a direct threat. So my question is, did any of the threatening that took place to burn homes and farms, did any of that actually take place? Because it's not really a direct threat if it never takes place. And the calling of names, oh my goodness, that's a direct threat? Let's kill the Boers, kill the Afrikaners. Did anybody die as a result of those statements? Or I should say those alleged statements? Because again, no receipts, no evidence, no proof. He never answered the question. He went right into talking about expropriations. Okay. And there are articles, one of which I put up, that said this is not what has taken place. But because the orange one said that it took place, everybody's believing it. Nobody's doing any reading on their own. And even there are news outlets here in the United States that have already debunked this, but there are news outlets like the BBC, Reuters, and Al Jazeera that debunk this. Didn't happen. We know why these people are here, but we'll talk about that a little later in the video.
I just wanted to know,
I can't hear you that well, sorry.
from the BBC. There are many people who fit the criteria of seeking help, who are fleeing persecution, Afghans, for example, and they live in a country run by the Taliban. But they're being denied refugee status. So I'm wondering, why has such an exception been made for the Afrikaners, especially when the South African government says they're not in danger? And are you going to open up the refugee settlement program to others?
Thank you for that question. I think you may recall that on the president's first day in office, on January 20th of this year, he issued an executive order that paused U.S. refugee programs that had been going at record levels under the prior administration and had brought in people that we were not sure had been carefully vetted for national security issues, and put a pause on the refugee admission program in general. That pause, of course, was subject from the very beginning to exceptions where it was determined that this would be in the interest of the United States. Some of the criteria are making sure that refugees did not pose any challenge to our national security and that they could be assimilated easily into our country. So the president on February 7th issued an executive order about the egregious conditions in South Africa, and all of these folks who have just come in today have been carefully vetted pursuant to our refugee standards, and whether or not the broader refugee programs for other people around the world will be lifted is still an ongoing consideration. But again, the president has recognized the dire situation of this particular group of people, and again, they went through the process. It is not surprising, unfortunately, that a country from which refugees come does not concede that they are refugees, and unfortunately, the South African government has not done what we feel is appropriate to guarantee the rights of these citizens to live in peace with their fellow South Africans, which is why, under our domestic law, they were given refugee status. Thank you very much.
Y'all, let me say this loud and clear. These South Africans who call themselves Afrikaners with a K because they don't want to be associated with the true indigenous Africans. Yeah, they came, I think they're Dutch, and they came there a long time ago and not only colonized but took over South Africa. Many of you uh, may know that this is how they came to be the Afrikaners. Okay, it's ridiculous. But anyway, um, all the prejudice and the racism aside, and the apartheid and everything else that they have done and would probably continue to do if they could. Um, the thing is, these people are not here to bring apartheid over here. They may want to bring it with them, but they're here to replenish and to increase the acromis population. Yeah, those people who don't have the melanin in their skin, they're here for that. That's why they're here. They were not facing any discrimination or anything like that in South Africa. They saw sort of the writing on the wall, the way that their counterparts here in the United States are beginning to see the writing on the wall. And they wanted to come somewhere. And also, they were invited by the Great Orange One to come over here for the specific purpose of increasing people who don't have melanin in their skin. Y'all know who I'm talking about. I would just come right out and say it, but TikTok, they have their rules. So I'm trying to stick with the rules. Okay. But these people are here for that and that only. And here's the strange thing, as I said in the clip, this is nothing less than breeding, the same type of breeding that they did to Africans and their descendants during slavery. It's the same thing. They went over there and said, where can we go? Oh, you know what? We'll go to South Africa because they're kind of like minded. They're kind of akin to, the same things that we think, and, they reason the same way that we do. And it really won't be very hard to convince them. And no telling what's in the contract, no telling whether these people have to stay here indefinitely, no telling whether there's a specific time that they have to stay here, no telling what they agreed to be here, no telling that there are restrictions. There's no telling because we don't have the contract, okay? But when you have news sources outside of the United States and some in the United States that are telling you that all this stuff about them being persecuted and being refugees an untruth, then that's what it is. Okay? I don't know why the great orange one thinks that, our heads screw off and on, that they can just sell us a bill of goods and we'll buy it. No, we're not buying what you're selling. Okay? We are not buying what you're selling. So thank you for joining me. Peace and blessings to you. And always, 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 always stay woke. You don't see things unless you woke. You can't see things if you sleep because your eyes are closed. So stay woke, y'all. Stay woke. And we will see you next time. Love you.